What's up, gang? Thanks for joining the Undiplomatic Podcast, the show with undiplomatic takes about the foreign policy scene. I'm Van Jackson here with Matt Duss and Julia Gledhill, my co-host. What's up, friends?
All right.
Hanging in.
Great to see you.
Hanging in. Yeah. Fucking A. So one quick thing I wanted to hit up front today, should only take a second. The latest of the DOGE boys rounds of cuts, Department of Government Efficiency. There's many kind of insane things that they're trying to cut, as in like, not like, why are they cutting this? Or like, do you realize the harm you're doing? And just in keeping with the foreign policy beat, they announced and made a big deal of the fact that they're canceling, quote, $45 million in DEI scholarships for Burma. And I know a couple people who are involved in sort of like facilitating this. And what they said is that this is a scholarship program that is designed to bring Burmese kids to study at U.S. schools. And the State Department was basically seeing this as a way to shape a generation of Burmese elites. And in like the way I read stuff, that's kind of anti-DEI in a sense. Like, it's about perpetuating friendly ruling classes in other countries, you know, or like if you fetishize American power, like this is a way to do it, you know. But the crucial thing is that like this is money that was going to American universities. It wasn't going to Myanmar.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so we're under the cover of DEI, we're defunding American universities in a way.
So I guess what you're getting at is that DEI is just this basket that they throw anything into.
Everything we don't like is
everything we don't like. It's DEI. You know, it really is. I mean, it's just like when things go wrong. Oh well, obviously DEI. You know, I mean, it sounds ridiculous because it is ridiculous, but that's their play.
DEI is under your bed waiting to get you at night.
That's exactly right. You know.
It's a really effective messaging strategy, though. I mean, we're recording this the day after this plane crash in D.C., which was horrifying.
Yeah.
Black Hawk helicopter ran straight into an American Airlines flight, and the response has literally been from Trump, this could be a failure of DEI. And
DEI, yeah.
And it's like, it's super effective because, you know, I've seen a headline maybe here or there about the fact that Trump fired the FFA administrator and I believe significant portions of the sort of high-level staff over there. But that's not the story. The story is how could DEI possibly be responsible for this?
Right. No, but it really does. That's, again, it gets to anything where any person who has any minority, you know, background of any kind. Obviously, this person, they were elevated to this level because of DEI. It's not a systemic failure. It's not certainly not our fault. I mean, as I said, it's a basket which you can literally throw anything into that you don't like.
Yeah, and it's expected from Trump and Vance, I think the hardest part for me to swallow is seeing it from like the press secretary and sort of like women in the Trump administration, because I'm just like, white women are the biggest beneficiaries of DEI. They are the biggest winners of DEI, and yet they admonish it in a way that I don't think that they're not making that connection. And it goes back to I was remembering a bill. I think that Vance, you know, obviously he's been, you know, waging this war against professors and higher education for years, but he introduced a bill a few years ago when he was in the Senate around like the affirmative action stuff and the Supreme Court ruling. And I don't believe that, you know, this DEI conversation applies to legacy admissions for children of the elite going to Ivy League colleges. Of course not. But that would actually be the most consistent with Vance's entire brand. But of course not. Of course, that's not part of his project.
No, I mean, that came up just recently. I was seeing someone was putting this story out again because after, you know, RFK Jr.'s really wonderful and wacky confirmation hearing, which we have to spend a minute on Bernie and the onesies. But, you know, his application to Harvard was just his name. Like, just literally, he wrote his name on the application, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and was admitted. So as you said, I mean, that would be, you know, but that's not what this is about. And I think we talked about this a last episode or a couple episodes ago about, I mean, I think there is a really good conversation we should have about the way that DEI has been kind of seized upon by corporate America and the liberal establishment as a way to kind of check a box of diversity, in a way that, avoids having to actually make workers' lives better. And I really don't want the left, certainly, or anyone, the liberal establishment, to get trapped, to trap itself into defending DEI as it is, because what it's become is, as I said, it's just this corporate legal, HR box checking exercise that really, I don't want to dismiss it. Certainly, diversity is important for a whole bunch of reasons. But that part of it, I think we really should be honest that it's not doing anything to make people's lives better. It just forces them to sit through multi-hour seminars and to learn how to use inoffensive language, which is a good thing. I think we should be courteous and kind as much as possible, but it's used to distract from actual material changes in people's lives.
That's to the extent that this like DEI is the boogeyman is a sort of popular sentiment. It's totally because people equate it with like HR, and everybody fucking hates HR. No offense to any HR podcast heads, but like that's it, or if you have a chip on your shoulder about your coworkers and you wish you could tell them off more or something, and you're like, oh, I can't because of DEI, or it's people have like petty grievances that they associate with DEI because it's been like corporatized and institutionalized. Yeah. Anyways.
Or it actually functions to protect the people who already have power and privilege, which is why I'm like saying that white women tend to be the biggest winners, because they're also
I'm glad you say it, because like I would get thrashed if I said that, but like I've kind of low-key had that view for a while.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I feel an obligation to say it.
Very undiplomatic. Okay. Well,
hey. like in the movie when they say the title of the movie.
You see what I did there? Yeah. In fact, there was a piece in N+1 about Netflix, minor tangent, and what they've sort of done to movies and films, and like the streaming culture and all of that, but also the Netflix model. One of the things that the piece identified was that Netflix has started this thing where like you name a movie something that's like boneheadedly stupid and direct. So like you do a movie that's like a murder mystery movie and you call it Murder Mystery starring Adam Sandler or whatever, and like, so everything is like about SEO optimization kind of, even, so like stripping down the art to basically like what the algorithm tells you to do, just kind of nuts.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, that goes back, like Scary Movie, High School Musical.
That's where it started. I think
that trend was ongoing.
It also gives you the space to like do something satirical badly, because you can just say it's like campy, even if it's not really like, it's not actually that clever.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're covered. That's exactly right.
Yeah. I had not heard the term before, but the concept of mid TV, which is like it's literally TV that you're supposed to just be able to have on in the background while you're looking at a different screen, which is like fuck unbelievable that you're purposely producing content slop,
No, but see, I love doing that with like masterpiece movies.
With good movies.
With good movies.
Good shows.
Like you put them on because at least I do this. I put them on just because I watch them so many times and I love being in that space, in that environment with those people, with the kind of
vibe setter.
Exactly. The vibe that it creates, and much as, I like albums for that reason too. But I don't want people creating just churning out content just to be in the background.
Yes. So we didn't expect to have Matt on, but I think he really wanted to come on because we were going to talk about Senator Bob Menendez, sentenced to 11 years in prison. And I have a very short clip of his statement that we should share here.
Welcome to the Southern District of New York, the Wild West of political prosecutions. President Trump is right. This process is political and it's corrupted to the core. I hope President Trump cleans up the cesspool and restores the integrity to the system.
Are you gonna ask? Take the L. This is so embarrassing.
Apart in Senator.
No, I
It's
mean, okay, let's just back up a little bit. Okay. From the beginning, like, first of all, when the indictment came, he was being targeted because he's Latino. This, they don't like this Latino boy who rose up.
He's the
They can't-
epitome of the American dream.
Right. And then he blamed his wife. She was doing all this stuff. I didn't know what these stacks of gold bars were about, and who knows? I mean,
didn't they? They were
there's
describing
envelopes-
her as like my tall,
Yeah.
sexy, tanned wife or something like that.
No, they said
yeah,
the gold bars
that's
are a typical Lebanese custom.
Lebanese
Uh.
customs, envelopes stuffed with cash. And then this final act where he goes full Trump in just a naked last-ditch attempt to appeal to Trump for a pardon. It's just a punk all the way down, man. This guy at every step, a complete punk. And and we've talked about this before. It's like, what's notable about this whole corruption trial is how hard Menendez had to work to get caught. I mean, that's itself an indictment of the American political system, is that, our Supreme Court, our courts have defined political corruption out of existence, essentially. And so you really have to want to do it. And Bob Menendez was like, challenge accepted.
Gotta want it.
I'm gonna do this. But also, let's think about, like, this grubby crook exercised enormous power over the Senate Democrats' foreign policy agenda for like a decade.
SFRC chair, yeah.
Dude, I knew
SFRC chair,
staffers of
ranking,
SFRC for him for years. They worked for
Mhm.
him,
Mhm.
and they were like, you mentioned this in a previous episode, I think, when Gold Bar Bob was first being indicted. But like, what he did is like more in your face than some of the corruption that goes on the Hill. But it's not like a radical, like you could operate with somebody this flagrantly corrupt for a long time and just think it's business as usual.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
And the
totally,
Democratic
because,
Party did.
yeah,
Because, I mean, let's
I mean,
remember,
literally, yeah.
No, even remember, he was under indictment. He was on trial when the party supported him for re-election,
Yeah.
the first time.
Well, because a lot of the
it's nuts.
peddling for foreign powers is legal. So the fact that he was the first sitting senator to be convicted of acting as an unregistered foreign agent is really significant. But also, to your point about really wanting to get caught, he beat political corruption charges in 2015, and part of the reason he threw his wife under the bus, which is so just lame and dishonorable. Again, just go to prison, dude. You lost. You're
Yeah.
known as Gold Bar Bob. Your whole Senate legacy is
Yeah.
down the toilet. Just accept
Right.
it.
Right.
You're digging your own grave deeper when you go try to blame other people, because nobody likes someone who's gonna blame their pretty wife. Are you
Yeah.
I
kidding?
don't know. My very attractive wife was dealing behind my back.
But it's because she introduced him to one of the business New Jersey businessmen that also has been convicted and going to prison, the YL I forget his last name, but he was convicted on all 16 counts this time after already being indicted in 2015 and getting by the skin on his teeth.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah.
The actual DOJ filing, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes, gold, cash, luxury convertible. They had a fake job for his wife. It was the way that the DOJ phrased it was
Yeah.
minimal or no effort job that she was being compensated for.
Yeah.
And she also had payments for her mortgage covered. It's wild.
Yeah.
And some of this stuff, I have to stress again, parts of this are very normal practice in the foreign policy world. Doing this kind of quid pro quo that's not a quid pro quo. That's the thing. Once it becomes an overt quid pro quo and you're on a wiretap being all right, you're going to give me these 7 gold bars and
Right.
then I'm going to change the policy. That's when you're begging to get caught. But
Right.
if you just dilute it a little bit, make it modestly less transactional and have it be more about your interests and what you think are aligned with what these other guys want, and they just happen to be, greasing the pot for you a bit, or whatever the metaphor is. Like, that's some normal shit,
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah,
Foreign Agent Registration Act is often not
yeah.
applicable to the think tank space.
There's so many loopholes. It's so poorly enforced, and that's what I mean when I say, like, for Menendez to get caught and convicted like this, he really had to knock it out of the park. So there is a kind of weird level of respect I have for, like, his absolute commitment to doing corruption. But as you said, so much of this is normal. But there's a level. I mean, people who rise to this level of power and get used to it, they just start to think, well, this is my due.
You think that you're
I
operating in a certain way, and you're
because
getting away
I
with
am
it.
so important. I am giving so much to the people. What I do is, I'm working these long hours, and they often do work long hours. They work late into night sometimes, not all the time. But again, just a statement, and I think I mentioned maybe on the last time, I don't remember. I was recently in Israel, Palestine, and talking to folks, and one of the things that came up is that Netanyahu has been under this corruption investigation for years now. This is like one of the driving this is the imperative of his political life right now, is how do I stay out of jail?
Bob Menendez of Israel, yeah.
Right, but it's also like what Netanyahu did is not illegal in the United States. Like, when I say we have defined corruption out of existence, Netanyahu getting expensive gifts from people who want and got favors from him. Our Supreme Court, in its great wisdom, have simply defined that as like, well, can't friends do favors for friends?
Yeah.
It's really wild.
As long as you report it, even if you don't, though, you're probably fine.
It. Yeah.
And if you don't, people forget things.
Yeah, it's like,
that's
oh well.
that's what amendments are for.
Yeah, just some trips among friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, his appeal to Trump at the end. I mean, it is just like
That's
so
the worst.
nakedly opportunistic, and like
Mhm.
again, it's so just like lame and embarrassing. But
Yeah.
I will admit that I think this came up briefly last week, and I was like, he didn't really get it that much out of this, like for what, to push an arms sale to Egypt. But I was like thinking about Eric Adams, because Eric Adams got like a few flights, like
Yeah.
probably a few $1,000s. I'm like, dude, if you're gonna do stuff for the Turkish government, at least get like a crazy hair transplant. You know what I mean? But I think that Eric Adams is probably more likely to get pardoned than Menendez.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see.
I don't know. I think it was probably, I don't know how much it was. It was probably a couple $100,000 for Adams, because I understand he was just getting like first class Turkish Airlines flights, which is why he always had to transfer through Istanbul. Like,
Yeah,
everywhere
like the last
he went,
minute.
there's
Yeah.
like all these trips, we got to go through Istanbul. Istanbul's great. He should have stopped there and hung out. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really an awesome city. I highly recommend it. But
I imagine Goldbar Bob is not the only Democrat who would declare a kind of Trumpism if they saw that it would clearly stood a chance of benefiting them personally, and that's kind of like scummy.
yeah,
Totally.
Anyways, all right. Well, good luck,
the
Bob.
opposition.
Yeah. Next up, we got, actually, Julia has a report from the Stimson Center that's quite excellent. How to cut the Pentagon at the level of $60 billion a year. I've written, making recommendations, some of these exact cuts, and that's how popular
Fabulous.
they are.
I'm glad we're on the same page. Yeah. Yeah. So I co-authored this with my friends at the Quincy Institute and Taxpayers for Common Sense, Bill Hartug and Gabe Murphy. Shout out to them. We are in a Pentagon budget cut coalition together. So cool to, collaborate on this brief. I feel like I have to preface it by saying a fat disclaimer, which is that DOGE is a redundant and illegal entity. And I don't want to sort of validate it in any way. However, it is our job to, appeal to political opportunities and capitalize on them.
It's part of the field of
possible.
forces that you're operating within.
Yeah.
We don't co-sign. Yeah.
Yeah. So, onward and forward, I suppose. But so, we wanted to write this brief to kind of outline in broad terms areas for savings in the Pentagon budget. And I will say we were quite conservative in our approach. We could have said close Guantanamo Bay, and some of the propositions are incredibly bold in DC terms, like canceling the Sentinel program, for example.
ICBM,
Which has already experienced critical cost breaches by like 81% and whatever. It's like a stupid program.
That you don't need it. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I mean, the weapons cut stuff is controversial to some, but the one sort of recommendation that I want to highlight that we include in our brief to save at least $60 billion at the Pentagon is actually to cut service contracting. And the reason I am highlighting this is because it's the biggest area of savings. It's like almost $30 billion a year if we cut bureaucracy within the Department of Defense. And the other reason I want to highlight it is because I think it's probably the biggest tension for DOGE if they go forward with their word, which TBD, but their stated, goal to cut inefficiency and bureaucracy kind of runs counter to the way that the Pentagon actually functions, which is that the DoD spends like half of its like money every year on service contracting to do basic administrative functions like IT support, like equipment maintenance, like really basic things. But that would be really difficult for, I think, Elon Musk maybe conceptually, because he has this belief and reverence for private industry over government capacity, when in fact there have been several studies that show that in this particular area, like just basic government functions like IT or medical services at the Pentagon can be done much cheaper and better by government employees rather than private service contractors. So yeah, that was like sort of our biggest recommendation in terms of savings, but we also talk a lot about weapons cuts and sort of other like sort of process-oriented things. Some of our recommendations were sort of difficult to estimate in terms of savings, just because we don't have a lot of tracking mechanisms to like see how much contractors are ripping off the government. But yeah, check it out if you're interested. We will definitely be promoting it in every which way in the months going forward, particularly as DOGE kind of faces, I think, pretty existential questions. There are several organizations that actually filed a suit against it like a week and a half ago because it's violating the Federal Advisory Committee Act, and it's also just like unconstitutional because you need an act of Congress to establish a federal entity. However, if they survive, could be an area of opportunity to work with the Trump administration.
Yeah. For strategy heads, there's a list of capabilities that they want to cut, and then there's like rough order of magnitude cost figures associated with it. So like it's not just a report about like fraud, waste, and abuse in the sort of the traditional sense. Like actually this is couched in a context of, you had some disclaimer at the front, like actually this and more is possible if we just did a restraint grand strategy and it would all be strategically coherent and make us more secure. But since we don't have that, here are some capabilities that we can afford to cut. It's like,
well, it needs to be said because we started to sort of get at the issue of force structure, and then we just sort of landed in a place where we were like, none of us have worked on this issue extensively, and so we're going to sort of leave it at that, because there are people that focus all of their attention on military force structure and sort of like how to sort of better align our military forces with a grand strategy of restraint. There are a few people working on like bigger projects on that, so I'm going to sort of wait to hear the word from them. But I mean, we do sort of address it in the basing infrastructure section, where we just talk about the BRAC process, base realignment and closure, which does have some upfront costs, but would save a lot of money long term. And we have done that before, and it's a proposal that comes up in the NDAA every year and never really goes anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, there's the language of strategy. Like strategy is the sort of idiom that would be used to push back on basically any cuts. It's like how you defend the status quo by you strategy washing it. And so we need the ICBMs because how else are you going to have a nuclear triad? That kind of thing. And then, so going there is important. No, but it's great report.
Thank you.
Next topic. So the House, Marjorie Taylor Greene, some of the MAGA folks, they have this proposed HR 26, which designates Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. The great Jessica Burbank said on Twitter, And she's right. Antifa is not a real organization. They will very likely use this to target any activist or organizer who is anti-fascist. You know, during Trump 1.0, for obvious reasons, I went down a rabbit hole researching anti-fascism kind of for the first time. And there is no Antifa structure. It's a shorthand for people who identify as anti-fascist. And last time I checked,
as we all should.
That should
we
be
are
everyone.
all supposed to be anti-fascist. So, like, to participate and to believe in electoral democracy is supposed to be against fascism. It's the alternative. And so, like, and also, people might have memory hold this, but the Trump administration was using the Antifa label in response to the George Floyd uprisings in 2020 to target anybody advocating for social justice. They were DHS was grabbing people off the street, throwing them in unmarked vans, and then taking them to detention centers. This is in Portland, you know?
Yeah.
And like surveilling nonviolent protesters. Like the state was being used to repress mass demands for social justice. That's anti-democratic, you know?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it's pretty consistent. You know, they said they were going to do this. They wanted to do this. And this is, it's related to this. We just saw yesterday or the day before the White House's strategy on combating anti-Semitism, which laid out a plan for, you know, deporting, you know, foreign students, you know, here on student visas for, you know, support for terrorism, which is defined so broadly as to if you are a foreign student who was part of the encampments, you know, protesting the Gaza war, clearly
it's
they will
straight up repression of dissent.
It absolutely is. So these things are very related. The complete, you know, using the instruments of the state to deny people their rights. I mean, yes, foreign students, when they are here, whether they're not they are citizens, they have the same rights to free speech that we all do or should. But yeah, these are not great signs.
It's also, I think, reflective of like broader constitutional crisis, right? Like just Trump's like grabs at executive power,
All power.
and all power. And this bill follows another one from December that the House passed called the Stop Terror Financing and Tax Penalties on American Hostages Act, which is the one that would basically give Treasury Secretary Bessent the ability to like designate nonprofits as supporters of terrorism and strip them of tax exempt status, which is also like incredible executive overreach because you're giving an unelected presidential, you know, like appointee.
There was no standard for how you would be able to do this. You can just do it. You just say
right. And it reminded me, so Elizabeth Beavers is a national security law expert who wrote a piece in Inkstick about like the definition of terrorism more broadly, and basically like talks about this bill, the Stop Terror Financing Act one that passed in the House, and says like, you know, this is basically a logical extension of like the massive executive powers that already exist, and, you know, argues essentially that we should dismantle like all terror designation lists, because like there's no universal legal definition for it, and it is literally just a politicized tool to like oppress people you don't like, which we've seen demonstrably for a very long time.
No, so it's like the NGO designation bill, which is supposed to be chilling on free speech. You have this Antifa designation bill, and then you have the TikTok ban bill, which people don't talk about this, but it's not actually, it's TikTok ban as branding, but it actually gives the president the authority to do the exact same thing, the ban, the forced sale to an American company or ban of any social media platform that has more than 1 million users. So it's like with that trifecta of legislation, you know, we're going to be fucking Sig Heiling. Like, what is that? Like, there's no room for speech. There's no room for anything except like white nationalist conformity, you know? On the Antifa thing, real quick, Matt, you may not remember this, but this was actually like a crucial moment in 2020. There was like a super chill in the air about.
I was around in 2020.
I'm not claiming you're senile. I'm just claiming this might not have been a big moment for you. So like, because you were busy. But like it was like police kidnappings of protesters. Like people were worried about civil war, right?
Oh no, I remember it well. I remember the white vans, in Portland.
Trump politicians screaming in that context to designate Antifa a terrorist group. And in that context, I remember a lot of establishment lib types being like basically afraid to say anything that could be construed as anti-fascist, right? And in that context, when you were Bernie's foreign policy advisor, I will never forget this, climate of pure fear, and then you blasted on Twitter, yo, FBI, I'm anti-fascist. You know where to find me. And in that moment, I was like, I think you had been on the pod once at that point already, but I was like, oh, this is one of my guys. Like, this is it, like it's a small thing. That's why I said it's fucking Twitter, but you were using your privilege to contest the Trump narrative and to keep popular opinion on the side of anti-fascism. And I in my little circle that I observe, it had like an emboldening effect on behalf of anti-fascism, which was like not a small thing. But more than that, it was like, okay, this guy's not some fucking loser Washington guy, or he's not just that. So
appreciate that.
Yeah.
The Gaza case study, though, is, I think, really important here. Like Elizabeth writes about this, but and I've seen this in like my personal life where like the material support aspect of the legislation, I think, is one of the more like scary ones, because again, like it's at the discretion of whoever is president and their appointees, their cabinet. But like you have people openly like fundraising for example, the IDF, or sending money to Israel in some form, and yet people who are, for example, making contributions to like fight a famine like of Palestinians are like then risking being on these lists and
it's not just the IDF. I mean, you have years ago I wrote about the Hebron Fund. I went to a fundraiser, this lavish fundraiser in Manhattan. Money was going to the settler community in Hebron, which is one of the most violent settler communities, that there are. I mean, Hebron is one of the worst sites of ongoing violence by, Israeli settlers backed by the military. But yeah, that material support thing is scary because it's also for groups, even if you go and you are talking to someone who's part of a designated group, and even that designation, that relationship is very hazy.
The spiderweb diagram of like, you contacted this person.
Right,
and like,
right. This whole 6 degrees of Osama bin Laden game.
Yeah.
If you buy them coffee, that, supposedly would count as material support.
So you've got this trifecta of legislation, and it's like, this gives the ability to make anybody a political enemy, to go after anybody that you decide is your enemy,
Right. No, and it is so clear, it is so blatant. And as always, the question is, will the opposition have the courage to call it out for what it is? And I don't have a lot of confidence, folks. I'm sorry. What we're seeing thus far, I mean, I didn't have much confidence to begin with. I'm ready to be surprised, but I'm not impressed.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think one of the central issues is that we just never ended the war on terror. By we, I mean like the United States. Like we've just turned to China now instead, and like all of this war on terror infrastructure is still in place and is now being expanded.
Right.
I need to read your book, man.
That's part of the argument. Is like,
but it's also,
there was no lesson learning from GWAT. We just went straight to great power rivalry.
We must look forward, not backward. I mean, one of the most consequential and cowardly decisions that Obama made was to be like, yeah, we tortured some folks. It was bad. We did some bad stuff, but hey, let's look forward. No, we still need to look back.
Yeah, there is.
Now,
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, like, Trump is now talking about Guantanamo Bay and making it like a, expanding it as a detention center for immigrants.
That's so on the nose for like the imperial boomerang. Like, it's too perfect, A site for war crimes abroad becomes a site for war crimes at home.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, all of this is kind of
so onto the good news.
Yeah. And by good news, we mean JD Vance and his version of Christianity, which basically tells you to fuck your neighbor and not in the good way. Okay. So I've got, sorry. So I might have to edit that out. So let me share this clip real quick.
Yeah, man, my mom listens to this podcast.
Does she
Yeah,
really?
All right. So,
Well, I'm doubly sorry for that.
and she's,
But there's this old school, and I think it's a very Christian concept, by the way, that you love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country. And then after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world. A lot of the far left has completely inverted that. They seem to hate the citizens of their own country and care more about people outside their own borders. That is no way to run a society. And I think the profound difference that Donald Trump brings to the leadership of this country is the simple concept, America first. It doesn't mean you hate anybody else. It means that you have leadership. And President Trump has been very clear about this, that puts the interests of American citizens first. In the same way that the British Prime Minister should care about Brits and the French should care about the French, we have an American president who cares primarily about Americans, and that's a very welcome change.
What is President Xi doing? What is Vladimir Putin
He's looking
doing?
after the Chinese. Putin is looking after the Russians. They're entitled to do that. Thank God we now have an American president who's looking after the citizens of his own country.
Wow. Well,
no, I mean, that there's nothing scriptural at all about what he said. I mean, for him to just come out and saying, this is a very Christian concept. I mean, show me where Jesus ever said anything like that. Show me, I mean, it's these guys who are inverting the message of Jesus. I mean, I hate to have to state the obvious here, but it really is, and it's not surprising, but just to see it so blatantly and just like asserted with zero basis in the gospel at all, that, to just, literally shoehorn Christianity into the mold of MAGA, just like, Jesus
that's
was a
what
trumper.
it is. Precisely
Jesus
what
was
it
a
is,
trumper. If you really think about
it. Like, Jesus was the OG class warrior, like he went hard in the paint for the poor. Like, where's that? Like love thy neighbor, Mark 12:31, right?
I mean, the concept of nation states as we know them now was not a thing. Yes, you had families, you had communities, but like love your neighbor as yourself is the actual quote.
Matthew 5:43, love even your enemies.
Yes.
Which is also in Ender's Game, by the way.
Yes.
But like that's like this.
I love when you throw out verses here, man. We need to do more of this.
I got verses, I got bars.
Yes.
But no, like I'm not a religious person, but I did my PhD at Catholic University and I grew up in the church. I think y'all did too, right? Like,
Yeah.
This is the Christianity that I know does not do ranked choice loving. Like, it's an expansive, inclusive fucking religion. It's not hierarchical. What the fuck?
No, like what he said is literally antichrist. That's what it is.
Hot damn.
Yeah.
You just said it.
There's like something in the Bible about, he who asks for water, like, is a disciple of God, or like you give someone a cup of water and he's, your disciple or something. And it's like, literally, if you give someone who's accused of giving material support to a quote unquote terrorist, then you are then
Jesus would be Antifa. Yeah.
like Jesus could be accused of material support for terrorism by giving someone a cup of water. Like, literally. It's insane.
100%.
I mean, I do think that like Vance is being really clear to his base. Like, you are completely alone. All you have is each other. We do not give a shit about you, And I think this also ties into like his comments on the campaign trail about just like his sort of perception of like human value. Like, people don't matter. Like only you in relation to the nuclear family matters. And that still is just like so disconcerting to me, because he pissed off a lot of people with those comments when whatever his like incoherent, you shouldn't get a vote if you don't procreate like comments. And this was very much in line with that sort of like mode of thinking, which is interesting because it feels like he didn't really respond. I guess he's been emboldened by obviously the electoral victory that he and Trump just had. But like, you would think that he would pivot a little bit, just given sort of the responses that he got even from within his own party. But this is very much like within that line of thinking of like, you do not matter outside of your ability to, like be in a nuclear family.
It's so nuts. Like, I mean, and that's a carryover from neoliberalism too. Like neoliberalism was famously like there is no society, there are only families, right? But it's like he's trying to fuse Christianity and the nation. But then you look at what they're doing and what they're promoting and what Project 2025 has already laid out and that they're implementing. And it's like, what is one issue on this agenda? Just one where it benefits the entire nation, or like even the majority of the nation. Like everything that they do appeals to sectional interests. Everything they do divides up the nation. Everything they do benefits one portion at the expense of another, which is also how they're doing foreign policy so far. It's like everything is like, we get ours, but we don't just get ours. We get ours by taking yours, or by redirecting.
Because they have a clear definition of who the real citizenry is, who the real nation is, and whose citizenship is conditional. And we want more. And again, I don't want to constantly be making Nazi analogies, but the Nazis gave out motherhood awards, right? For
I didn't know that, really.
Indian citizens who were.
There's actually a fascinating paper about feminism under Nazism.
This stuff it resonates very, very clearly.
Like based on how many children you have?
Yes, who were creating good new German families.
Wow.
So this is, we want to create more of the real Volk, not the conditional, right?
Yeah. He's Christianity washing white nationalist oligarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to suck for most of us. And it's just, the thing is like, it's happening. They're doing it and they're saying it and they're doing it, literally and seriously. So like, what the, I feel like we're not well organized to even respond to this stuff,
Yeah, I mean, like, I think part of the challenge is just staying focused on like your contribution to the peace movement and like, advancing a better foreign policy. Like I'm personally, I'm paying attention, but I'm just trying not to get too caught up in like just the stuff that I don't work on, because I just can't do anything about it. And it distracts me. So like there's community building and there's like standing in solidarity with the people around you, and that's really important, and you obviously have to like pay attention for that reason, but the sort of like the like stupid press briefings and comments and things like that, I see them, I scroll past them, sometimes I react to them, but mostly I'm just trying to like stay focused on my people and my work.
Well, good luck with that.
People.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for being my people.
All right, people. Well, that might be a good place to end it. Do we have any like saved rounds or anything I forgot to bring up?
I don't think so.
No.
Okay.
We'll get to it next time.
Well, this was a good one. Very clippable. All right. All right. Thanks, guys. And thanks for joining us once again.
All right. See you next time.
On Diplomatic
Bye.
People.
Peace out.
All right. Peace.